Hello everyone, I'm Rihanna Lilly-Smith from Technology Networks, and today I'm excited to be joined by Wageh and Alysha D'Souza, doctoral candidates from McMaster University, to discuss their latest review paper published in the Journal of Applied Physiology. Their team investigated the many claims behind the advice given to women concerning the menstrual cycle and exercise. So, can you talk about what influenced your decision to investigate the menstrual cycle and exercise and any previous research that sparked your interest?
Yeah, of course. So I spent my entire childhood as being an athlete. I was a synchronized swimmer, and so I was always very heavily involved in sports growing up. And then I decided to do my undergrad in kinesiology, where I started to work as a personal trainer and a strength and conditioning coach. And it was during this time that I started to see information about the menstrual cycle and how it may or may not be influencing performance. And, having been a athlete in the past, and working with a lot of female clients in the gym space, I was like, was I doing something wrong? Could my performance or my training have been optimized in some other way if we had this kind of science and literature back then? And that's kind of what jump started my interest into looking into this research and just kind of figuring out what is there. I think I saw a lot of things on social media that really piqued it, and I was like, I would check kind of where that information was coming from, and I realized that there wasn't a ton of credibility behind what was being said. So I decided to dive into the research myself, and I met some other amazing researchers along the way that have been able to help kind of seek this evidence-based recommendations around the menstrual cycle and how it influences strength, performance, training, etc.
So, the review emphasises the substantial variations in hormonal levels among women during their menstrual cycles. In practical terms, how might these individual differences impact the way women experience and respond to exercise, and what implications does this have for a personalised training programme?
Yeah, so I think that's one misconception that our investigation tries to clear up, that menstrual cycles vary substantially, not just between women, but within a woman across cycles. So it's actually really fascinating to see how one cycle can get delayed by a particular stressor, for example. But what's more important to note is that alongside these variations, some research might say that there's a difference in performance across the menstrual cycle. And these performance changes likely don't come from the variations in hormonal concentrations, but are likely more associated with the symptoms that come with the menstrual cycle. And so that's why a lot of athletes, for example, use oral contraceptives or birth control to help sort of mitigate these menstrual cycle symptoms. And what we've seen in the literature is that for athletes using birth control, they don't actually experience phasic differences in exercise performance. So what this means practically is that because menstrual cycles aren't all the same, and because it's likely not the hormones that are underlying performance changes, we need to tailor exercise to the individual. Not everyone's going to experience the same symptoms in their menstrual cycle, so there's no menstrual cycle specific prescription that'll work for everyone. It's really just about listening to your body and figuring out what works for you.
Okay, so many women are currently following exercise advice based on the menstrual cycle phases without scientific support. What challenges do you foresee in changing or adapting current practices? And do you believe social media platforms could be to blame for encouraging this unsupported advice?
Yeah, social media plays a huge role. Fortunately and unfortunately, I guess it's good because it'll help us get this research out, but it's hard to sort of figure out like who's right and who's wrong and what do I believe. And so again, I think that's where it ultimately comes down to listening to your body and figuring out what works for you. But most importantly, I think what we want to get out there is if you're not already starting to track your cycle and your symptoms in your menstrual cycle, really just try to do that first. Try to understand how your body is operating during each phase and then adjust your exercise training plan accordingly. Because as Alysha said, like exercise is inherently an individualized activity. Everyone's going to experience something different. So if you can find out what works for you, despite what social media is saying, that's what's going to help you perform at the end of the day.
Thank you. So, can you tell me about the next steps for your research?
Yeah, so one of our biggest take homes from the study was that while there is research out there on women, and females specifically looking at the menstrual cycle, a lot of the research isn't what we would call high quality, meaning there's certain methodological targets that should be kind of met for us to really say confidently that, yeah, it is menstrual cycle phase that's influencing performance and adaptation. One of these errors is just not accurately confirming phase using things like ovulation testing. Um, right now, myself and a colleague, Derek Van Every, are running a training study because I've found the literature in that area to be really fascinating. And again, as a trainer myself. So we're running a menstrual cycle phase-based training study where we train individuals high volume in their follicular phase or high volume in their luteal phase. And we're also comparing it to a non-exercise control and a group that is just continuously training. So kind of the regular way of going to the gym, whether that's twice or 3 times a week. And we're looking at how that style of training over 3 menstrual cycles influences strength and hypertrophy adaptations, as well as other molecular muscular properties. And our biggest thing with this is that we are using gold standard methodology, which has been quite difficult, and it has opened my eyes as to why there maybe is not as much research in this area, or as much high quality research in this area. But yeah, that is kind of next steps is putting out some really high quality research to see, is there actually a difference? Is something like phase-based training a valuable training style for individuals that are trying to maximize strength and hypertrophy? But
I'll add on to that briefly. I think the next steps with respect to this research in particular is really just because we determine that it's likely the symptoms and not the actual hormones that are underlying any potential phase-based effects. We now want to look into whether these symptoms that are associated with the menstrual cycle are cycle-related or due to other stressors. And so these stressors could be sleep. We need to look at nutrition or work and other life-related issues. So there's very much a social factor that plays a role here. And we're also looking into sort of a molecular basis to phase-based adaptations using cell models in the lab, and now shifting to analyzing muscle tissue from human participants who would exercise in different phases of their menstrual cycle.
To make sure you never miss a story, subscribe to Breaking Science News, the daily newsletter by Technology Networks. Bye.